everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of Unplugged Sessions. Well, my guest today is someone who I've met during a number of industry-related events here in Edinburgh, and she has worked as a producer in a varying capacity since 2005. I'm very delighted today to have with me Sarah Gray from the Scottish Theatre Producers. Hey Sarah, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks. You?
I'm very good, thanks. Thanks for joining me and for taking the time actually to do this.
No problem at all.
I'd like to start by you giving us a very, very brief introduction about yourself and your role in the sector. And afterwards, we'll jump to what inspired you to actually found STP.
Okay. So I studied producing at university, and I was freelance just to begin with. And then went on to be the co-producer of the Young Company at the National Theatre of Scotland when it was founded in 2006. And that was a fixed term post. I was there for 18 months, so really thrown into an exciting, large organisation right at the beginning of it. And I then went from there to working with a company called Wee Stories, based in Edinburgh. Okay. And that was a very small organisation, so it was completely different as an experience. And rather than being a small cog in a big wheel, suddenly I was everything. I was ordering the photocopier, toner, and as well as producing the shows. And that was my first experience of working in children's theatre. And I realised how much I loved that and how important I thought that was. And so I was there for 4 years, and then I went to McRobert Arts Centre, and that was at a point where they had started to produce their own work in-house, in addition to their pantomime. And so I was there to lead on those in-house productions and also on the programming of the building. And so by then I had about, where was I? So got to about 9 years experience and had thought about going freelance and had always been a bit too scared and wondered if there would be enough work out there for me. And then I was very fortunate to get a place on the Creative Scotland Producers Project, which was an opportunity for producers to work together. So I was mentoring an emerging producer, and we were attached to Cumbernauld Theatre. And so we had the freedom of working like freelance producers, but with the security of the funding from Creative Scotland that was paying our salary, essentially. And it started initially as a 1-year project and was extended to 2 years. And so I was very lucky to take some of the artists who I'd been working with for a while through McRobert Arts Centre with me into that project. To continue working with them, and then was also approached by other artists, and the project enabled them to receive my time for free for the duration of the project, and to work with them year round and really help to establish some stability and continuity for them rather than working project to project. And from there, that 2 years really enabled me to set a lot of groundwork, apply for a lot of funding, and put a lot of projects into the mix. And so when that funding ended in 2016, I just carried on from there. And touch wood, fingers crossed.
That's so exciting.
It's all carried on from there and worked out so far.
Can I just ask you a question? Does that Creative Scotland funding still exist?
Unfortunately not. It came out of some research that had been carried out, and it was looking at the landscape of support for artists, for project funded artists and companies across the country. And it showed that there was a lack of support available for them, and this situation where producers needed to be paid and artists not having that money, and so being in this kind of strange situation of either the producer working for free in the hope that they would get the
Yeah.
funding for a project to then sort of retrospectively pay themselves, or the artist self-producing, and a lot of time that was holding them back from developing their work further. And so as a result of that report, Creative Scotland funded 4 venues and 8 producers. So there was a pair of producers in each of those 4 venues. And it was Cumbernauld Theatre, the Tron Theatre, Aberdeen Performing Arts, and Wood End Barn in Banchory. And each of the sets of producers and venues were allowed to very much set their own agenda of how they would work together. So in some places they were working much more embedded in the theatre and what the work of the theatre was. And for us at Cumbernauld, the artistic director, Ed Robson, was actually going on sabbatical. And so it meant that we came into it with, I suppose, just less expectations from the theatre of what we would do. And obviously we were based there, we developed work there, and we did produce a tour that was created there and then toured Scotland. But it just meant that actually we had a lot of freedom to just work with the artists that we wanted to work with, really.
How exciting. So that was kind of a really easy step for you to build your own company.
Yeah.
Because you also got to know different artists, you put to practice so many of your skills, and you could try different things. And I really would like to actually now hear more about exciting projects that you had and mention some of the most successful ones.
Okay.
I'm talking mainly about STP.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Scottish Theatre Producers was, it was really a way of representing all of the artists that we were working with under one banner. So it was started just for that reason, was so that when I was networking, if I was going to a conference, there was some outward facing brand, if you like, under which those artists could sit. And that was because a lot of those artists, they already had their own companies, so they had their own public persona already. So it was just one way of having, you know, a website, a business card that directed somebody to one place, and they saw all of the work that that myself and the other producer were representing. I think there's been a lot of highlights, and there's a lot that I've been really, really proud of. I think I'm probably most proud of the journey of the polar bears.
Okay.
So the polar bears are Fiona Manson and Ivor McCaskill, and they created these characters of the polar bears 10 years ago. And it was at the first ever Imaginate Family Day that they did this kind of walkabout thing, engaging with families, and the polar bears are non-verbal. So they interact silently. They have a map as if they're lost and they have to get home. And so they had started out like that, and then MacRobert Arts Centre commissioned them to make a Christmas show. And I was there and I started working with them. And then we took that show out on tour. And after I left MacRobert Arts Centre, we had already been booked to take it to the Unicorn Theatre down in London. And we took it there and we played for 3 or 3.5 weeks. And we played to 95% capacity.
Wow.
Which was incredible.
Of course.
Yeah, so that was...
Because that was mainly the first touring experience for the show, because before it just toured in Scotland.
It had toured in Scotland, but it had also toured to the Takeoff Festival. And that's where Puni Morel, who was the artistic director of the Unicorn, she saw the show. And she invited it to come to the Unicorn a year later. So we took it to the Unicorn. It had this amazing experience. And while we were there, I said to Ivor and Fiona, I really think that we should ask them to co-produce a new show with us. And so now we've co-produced 2 other productions with them. and we took one of those to America to the IPE conference, which is the International Performing Arts for Youth conference. And from that we secured 2 tours of America and Canada. We also won an award there, and we've now created this 3rd show, this 2nd co-production with the Unicorn, which was last year, and it was meant to be in rehearsals right now, and tour this summer, but it's been postponed to next summer.
Yeah.
And yes, so and that's the largest show that they've made so far. It's been made for mid-scale and larger stages, and it'll tour next summer. And we also won an award for that just about 2 weeks before lockdown. We won an Offie, which is a Off West End award for that.
That's
so
great.
I think that's my sort of that's my proudest kind of thing in terms of the journey that I've gone on with them, and been part of that success, and
of course, because you've seen them growing also. Yeah,
seeing them growing and seeing how engaged our audiences are, and just seeing how much they're loved around the world. And we've taken the show to Australia, we've taken it to America, to China a number of times, and just seeing how much the audiences love it everywhere.
That's great. Well, we have to keep an eye on when it's going to be next then.
Yes, so next July it will be touring in Scotland. Yes.
So I would like to speak about your role as a producer. Can you talk me through your role in the creative sector as a producer and its importance, actually?
So in the sector, as opposed to the kind of active role within a production?
Let's do it as kind of as an active role in the production, rather than the sector.
Sure. So in terms of working on a production, I work in lots of different ways. It depends whether I've worked with people for a long time or if it's a one-off production. But I very much like to see myself as part of the creative team. I think that sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what a producer is, and it can sometimes be confused with project management, the boring logistics that people don't want to have to do, and I think that a producer's role is much bigger than that, because I don't think it starts and ends with the production itself. So I think that being a member of the creative team, it's almost like being the audience and being an outside eye for the team. A rehearsal room can become quite an insular process for the people who are there every day, and I think that being somebody who can come into that process, who is trusted, who knows the work, who knows the artists, and is there to give some feedback and to see things in a slightly different way, can be very helpful. And I think it's also about generally being passionate about the work. Sometimes some artists don't feel very comfortable talking about their work, selling their own work. And for me, I really have to be really on board with anything that I produce. I have to be really passionate about it, so that I can go out and talk about that work to other people and try and find opportunities and a future life for that work, or just future opportunities for that artist, for collaborating with other people. And I think it's also about just bringing people together. So it's about being at the start of a process and being able to think of who are people who could work well together, who would complement a process, being involved in casting. I think there's lots of different creative roles, without feeling the need to use the word creative in a job
Yeah.
title. There's always a bit of debate about whether somebody is a creative producer or not, and I've never used it in my title because I just think that the role itself is inherently a creative role.
Would you call yourself a producer for creatives rather than a creative producer?
I just call myself producer.
That's good.
And in the same way that I don't think a director has to adapt their job title for every
That's true.
job that they take. I see it as producer. So yeah.
I'm very much interested. So you mentioned that some might misunderstand what a producer is, and you might end up doing a project manager role, or you can risk to get a project manager role rather than a producer role. So I'm interested in that falling from one project to another. How does it work for you? And do people phone you for work, or do you have to apply and interview for a job?
So I think luckily enough, I've been working in the sector long enough now that I do get approached for work, and tend to be in the fortunate position to decide whether to take the work or not. But there's obviously always times where I don't know people and people don't know me. So I'll always meet people for coffees and talk about projects and just. I think because that's one of the fundamental things of working together is knowing that you can work together, and so being able to meet somebody and know that you're going to be on the same page about things, you've got the same expectations and things like that. So the misunderstanding that I think sometimes happens is that I think that if sometimes people have always had to self-produce because it's been necessary, because there's been no money to employ a producer. And so when they are in a position to bring in a producer, they're just thinking about the things that they can get they can get rid of, the admin, the tour booking, the finances, the stuff that they are like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. And so if I meet somebody to talk about a project, and I get that sense that actually what they are looking for is just a project management position. Sometimes, yes, I will do those roles, but I'm always keen to talk to an artist about what else I can be offering and how I like to work, because I want to feel that I am collaborative with someone, and I want to feel that we're working together. And so I'm not just the hired help. I'm not coming in to work for you. We're working together on this. So I have been in a situation recently where I think that someone they actually, because they were less experienced, they just needed to hear from me what else I could do for them. So it was about me saying, here is the support that I can give you. And here is how I tend to work with people, and is that the way that you would like to work? And this person hearing that was very grateful and was like, that's exactly what I need, and actually yes, I think I do know that I need that support. But they hadn't thought about it in that way before. They had just been thinking, oh, this person will do the finances and they'll do,
and that's it.
Again, I think that that sometimes is a misunderstanding of the role, but I think there's also not there is no published guidance on what the fee for a producer should be. So you can look up equity rates and see a minimum for various roles, but not for the producer. And so sometimes if someone is putting together a budget and they don't understand that role, they really are just plucking a number out of the sky. And quite often, if I am coming into a project from the beginning of a process, I would normally say that I would expect to be paid at least the same as the director, in thinking about that preparation and things like that. I mean, there's lots of discussions that we could have about how much a producer should be paid, because I think that a lot of times producers aren't paid anywhere near the amount of money that Yeah, or the amount of money that they should be paid for the amount of work that goes in, thinking that
Of course.
a director is thinking about, you know, the preparation before the show and working on the show. And as a producer, sometimes you can be working on something for 18 months.
Well, my next question kind of has been already answered, but do you find yourself always getting work as a producer, or do you get other roles which may cross over?
Mostly as a producer. I do some training sessions and facilitation as well. So I've been involved in the Federation of Scottish Theatres Emporium for a number of years now. So I'm part of I lead the early dialogue day with Liam Sinclair, and we mentor artists and companies who are presenting ideas to venues, and I also lead some sessions on finance and funding and things like that. But those are sort of smaller one-off things, and everything else is as a producer.
That's great. It's fun.
Yeah.
So, the industry is amazing in itself, but there are loads of things that can go bad also at times. What has been one of the scariest moments working in the theatre business?
It's right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think right now is the scariest thing. It's the scariest thing I've ever experienced. The uncertainty of everything. It's been quite difficult. It's been quite difficult to live through it, because I think that doing this job, your natural instinct is to make it happen. It's for the show to go on, and so to suddenly have to undo all of your work and consider all of these different scenarios and be constantly pushing timescales back and things like that has been really unsettling and really difficult. And I think just that we're now entering this stage of we're at real danger of losing a lot of people in this business, and what if they don't come back, you know? I tried to think of other examples for this question, but that's got to be the scariest thing I've ever come across.
I think also not seeing the ray of light close to us, it makes it more difficult, because as you said, and we might talk about this later on, one of the main roles and responsibilities of a producer is to make things happen and to solve problems, but this is out of our league, kind of. We can't really solve anything.
I found it really, really difficult at the start of this process. I was affected by it really early, a lot earlier than some other people in the country, because I work a lot in China. And so because of the outbreak starting there, I started to be affected by cancellations in January. And so I had 3 tours that were all meant to go out to China between February and April. And so all of those were cancelled. And that was difficult because there was no financial buffers there. That was purely a case of, there was a force majeure clause in those contracts. And so no fees were received, and so therefore none of the team were paid, and including myself, because that's how I receive my fees, is a direct fee from that. And that was a big blow to begin with. And then I think that what was interesting was that no one, including myself, even thought at that point about what if this travelled?
Happens,
What if it arrived here? It was all just this thing that was happening in China.
And it happened so fast also.
Yeah. And it made me have to, think a lot about the fact that we had 3 separate companies who all tour work to China every year, a couple of times a year, and suddenly we're all really vulnerable with a situation like that. And then as it became apparent that this was going to last a lot longer, with the Polar Bears tour that was meant to go out in the summer, at this point we were really hopeful. We thought, it's this 12-week lockdown and then it's all going to be fine and it'll all lift. And then there was just this really, really uncertain period where the venues weren't cancelling. We thought it was going to go ahead. Then there was the announcement about the Edinburgh Festival and all of the Edinburgh festivals.
Cancelled.
And suddenly we thought, actually, even if everything is going to be okay, publicly, for us to announce that we're about to go out on tour in July, when all of the festivals in August have just been cancelled, is going to look really, really irresponsible. And so that's when we made the decision ourselves, before the venues really started cancelling on us, because of course everyone's in their own planning cycles, taking decisions at different times. And we felt so disempowered by all of that we kind of went, we have to make this decision ourselves and feel confident that this is something that we've decided we can control. And actually, even if everything turns out to be okay and everywhere is open, what's this experience going to be like for an audience and for our team if there's very few audience members there? And actually, let's make the decision early and then really concentrate on next year being a success. So it's been like these little losses to keep kind of working through, and it feels like a loss, like a grief, because you're just seeing all of these things disappear.
And the work that you have done, and you can't even see a result for it.
And that's really that's really difficult to see months and months of work and go, okay, now we need to start again.
All right, let's jump on relationships. So you seem that, and from the way you're talking about it, relationships are really, really important, to have that good and great relationship with the artists, directors, and companies that you're working with. Can you speak to me about that and your role as a producer? How important it is to build that relationship?
It's really important. I think that you have to, your way of working has to align, and your expectations have to be aligned with each other. And the biggest thing is trust as well, especially in a creative team, and working with a director. A lot of my learning has been through just experience and reflection. And I know myself that much earlier on in my career, I maybe wasn't as sensitive in a rehearsal room, like in how I would speak to a director, or it was only later that I could reflect and see that actually I have to adapt my approach and find my way of working, that every relationship is going to be different. So just establishing how you work together, and how do people like to have this input from me, because I'm not there every day. So if I do come in once a week and that changes the dynamic somehow, then how do I feed my thoughts in a creative way and in a constructive way that doesn't not offend anyone, doesn't just doesn't kind of rub anyone up the wrong way. And so it's definitely, I think, a trust thing, and it does come over time, or just as you get to know each other a bit better, I think.
It's a bit like a parent role. Because either they hate you or they love you.
A little bit. I think, I think, I mean, it's not just about the creatives as well. I think, I do see myself, I see my role is very much about supporting everybody. And,
of course.
And I think that I do have, good relationships with production teams and making sure that they are supported is really important as well, because they're the people who are putting in so much work. When a show goes out on tour, they're the first ones there, they're the last ones there. So making sure that they feel supported by me, I think, is really important.
Of course.
Making sure that they are looked after on tour, that they have, good accommodation, that hopefully I've planned the tour well, that they're not being, overworked, and that their days are too long. And just making sure that I check in with people and listen to them, I think is really important, is to just say, how is everything? And to be able to take that criticism or the moan from people and just make everybody feel that they are being considered, that it's not just about the performers when they're out on tour, or it's not just about the director when they're in the room.
Yeah, how beautiful that is. It's already a very stressful industry, and it's nice to have someone that it's there to support and making sure that everything is going well. Yeah. Touring is certainly your forte. Can you share some information and advice based on your knowledge and experience about producing touring work in general?
So I think most of my my knowledge is just been learned through time. But I would say that getting to know the venues is important in terms of approaching them, to take work to them, to sell work to them, understanding what work they normally present, so that you're not wasting your time or other people's time by trying to pitch a show to them that is really not their audience base. And getting to know the people who work there, and just trying to, I think, treating people as people as well, that it's important at networking, at conferences and things, to not be always, I'm here pitching, I'm selling something, it's chatting to, it's, yes, you want to find somebody in the coffee break because they haven't replied to an email, but it's also just about getting to know those people over the coffee break, because you all work in this sector. I've been on the other side of it, in terms of I've been the programmer as well, and so I think understanding how busy those people are, and also sometimes that it may not be their decision at the end of the day whether to take work or not, and the difficult balance of getting a program together. Just being kind of sensitive to the people in those roles who are being bombarded by emails and phone calls all the time.
Going back to producing touring work, what about the international logistics of touring work?
So I've been quite lucky with the children's work that I've toured, in that I began working with the Art Space for Kids, who are a promoter based in Shanghai, who have they have a few of their own venues, and then they also act as a promoter to tour around other cities. And they program a lot of work from Scotland, and I represent 3 separate shows that tour in China normally every year. And I've also taken work to festivals in Australia and Singapore and America, and each show or each visit comes with its own logistical issues or challenges, visas, freight, things like that. I work with a very good production manager who looks after the freight kind of logistics of things when a set needs to be taken somewhere. But we've also done some clever things with building duplicate sets and having them stored in those respective countries, rather than always taking things back and forth. So we have sets in China.
That's great.
And they just live in China, so that's great. And the promoter there takes care of those sets. So if we start a tour somewhere else in China, they take care of the logistics for that, which is great.
Yeah.
We did have a set for the polar bears that we built, which lived in America for a few years, and that worked out as something that was cheaper over that length of time than sending it back and forth. So we had one stored here in the UK, we had one in America, we had one in China. And then when we had performances in Hong Kong and Australia, we struck a deal with the promoter in China so that it could be freight to Hong Kong and to Australia and then back to China, rather than from the UK, to kind of make the cost cheaper. And then one of the artists that I work with, Ailey Cohen, she's a puppeteer, and she is brilliant at designing sets which are packed down into cases that can be taken on the aeroplane. And so she has made sets that are custom built trunks that are made to the specifications of the airline, so that everything is taken as excess baggage.
You must love that.
It's great.
Of course.
Yeah, it's great. And, you know, for festivals, it's fantastic. They don't have a £5,000 freight bill or more. That's helped a lot with a lot of things.
What else is involved in creating and touring a successful production?
I think sometimes you just never know. You never know if it's going to be a success or not. And sometimes all the pieces come together really, really well, and you have a great team, and everyone gets on really well, and somehow you've created something that that everyone is really, really, you know, invested in and loves. And then if the audience loves it too, and the press love it too, great.
Better.
And I think sometimes you just don't know if that's going to happen, especially if you are creating something that's going to go out straight away on tour. You're under that pressure to just make a show and open it, and you just never know if it's, you know, you can have the best idea in the world and somehow something doesn't quite gel. And then when it does happen, it's really quite amazing. I think for me, the one that I've been involved in like that is a play called Standby. And that was part of the Made in Scotland programme in 2017. And it won a Fringe first as well that year. And it went out on tour immediately after the Fringe. And it was a piece that had been in development for years. And then when I was part of the producers project, I had a budget for development. And so we did some more work on that. And it was directed by Joe Douglas, who's the artistic director at Live Theatre down in Newcastle. And it was written by Adam McNamara, who is an actor who used to be a police officer. And he used his experience as an ex-police officer to write this play. And the result was something that was just, I think that we had a brilliant team. The performers were fantastic. They got on so well. But I think also we just hit this moment where police dramas have, you know, been really popular in recent years. We also had these single earpiece headsets where you heard the control room. So every audience member had this. So the control room, in the same ways as the performers on stage had it, every audience member had it. So everyone received the information at the same time. And it was just something that, you know, something quite unique that that people seem to really enjoy. And we received brilliant feedback from the police themselves, you know, from ex-colleagues of Adam's. And there was just something about it that just worked on every level, really. So it went straight out on tour after the Fringe with brilliant reviews. It did amazingly well on tour, and we now have touring fund money to take it back out on tour again, which is due to be February. but I have no idea if that'll happen. But that was just, one of those moments where just everything seemed to align.
Work perfectly well. Are you scared from one country to another about how audience would take performance? Because, I mean, from experience, when I work with different artists who are touring around, they might come to a country, they go to a country and they'd be like, I can't understand the audience here. It works perfectly well in other countries.
Yeah, I think those differences definitely exist. I've had work which has been really well received here, and I've brought the promoter that I work with in China to come and see it, because obviously we have this existing relationship, and she's viewed a work and said, I can see that the audience love it, and I think it's great, but Chinese audiences won't understand. Either that there's maybe too much text, and that can be an issue when it comes to children's work. But for her, this particular piece, she just said the subject matter. She said it's just not something that they will understand as a life experience. And with Standby, we really expected a lot more international interest from the fringe. We were part of Made in Scotland. We had a lot of promoters coming to see it. And I don't think it was a specifically Scottish play, but I don't know if just the cultural differences between police forces in different countries meant that it just didn't feel like it could resonate in the same way. So there's definitely some works that translate really easily.
Can't apply to other countries.
I think with children's work, a lot of times it translates very well in different cultures, and I think that's why it's a lot of times it's so successful in touring from Scotland. But sometimes it just doesn't work culturally.
I think you already spoke about the key requirements for success. Now the next question kind of jumps on, what role does failure play in success?
I think it's just about learning. I think that if something doesn't work well, that's really hard at the time. But then, 6 months down the line, reflecting on that, when you've had a bit of distance from it and you don't feel so emotionally invested, you can see quite clearly what the learning is from it. Not necessarily that you could have done anything differently, but just what didn't work, what didn't come together in the right way. And as I was saying before about making a success, sometimes it's unavoidable. There is no way that something wouldn't have turned out the way that it did. But certainly there are times where you can look back on maybe relationships that you've had with certain people, maybe communication hasn't been great, and that informs your own learning of how you'll do things in future.
Yeah, so true. It's great. Last 4 questions, Sarah, which are 4 common questions which I ask to everyone. So what do you wish you had known when you had started working in the industry?
I think that it can take some time to establish yourself. That for people to get to know who you are, and for opportunities to arise, it can take that time. And I think that when you start out, you're so eager, and and sometimes it can be hard to understand why isn't everything just happening. So just knowing that it can take some hard work to just get to know people and get your passion across, and and become a known face, I suppose, within the sector.
So what would you tell people who aspire to work as a producer in the creative sector?
Get to know people.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think our sector is really supportive and open, and I think that I know myself that I get emails from people who will ask me, if I can have a coffee with them or talk to about a project, or maybe it's they've asked me some questions for their dissertation in university.
Yeah.
And I certainly found that when I was a student, a lot of people gave me their time, and I then do that in turn. So I think that not being afraid to just contact everybody and ask them to have a coffee. I mean, the networking opportunities and everything are great, but actually being able to sit down, one-on-one with people, and for them to know your face, to know who you are, what is it you want to do, what work are you interested in, and even if they don't have any opportunities there and then, 6 months down the line, if they do, then you might be the person that comes into their head. So yeah, I would just say to contact people and say hello, really.
Totally agree. So if you could have lunch with one creative, alive or dead, who would it be?
This was so hard. I found
I'm not
myself
gonna
trying to,
lie. I'm
it's
not gonna
so
lie.
hard.
Everyone has said that.
It's so hard. I think normally when you're asked for your dream dinner party guests, you get 5 or 10. So one is really hard. So the name that I just kept coming back to was Billy Connolly. And
Okay.
my reason for that is just that I think if it's only one person, if I'm able to just have dinner with one person, at least I know he's going to entertain me. I think the stories that he would have would be brilliant. And I really tried to think. I was thinking, would it be Shakespeare? Would it be some West End producer? And I just thought, if I only get one, then no, I just want Billy Connolly to make me laugh.
Amazing. Last question for you. So describe arts and culture in 3 words.
So yeah, again, a tough one to settle on given the current climate. But I think connection. Right now, I think vulnerable and vital.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, Sarah. That's been amazing. I really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's nice to chat to you too.
Thank you so much and speak very soon. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, thanks.